Hello, welcome to Make Kind Loud, conversations that turn up the volume. Today, I am super excited because I am talking to one of my favorite people in the entire world, Marquita Johnson. Hello, Marquita.
Woo! Hi, Aunt Lou.
How are you?
I'm well. How about you?
I am fantastic. So
Awesome.
basically, I'm going to tell the people about you, and then we're going to jump in and have this conversation. And I just want to
Okay.
hear your thoughts about the state of the world and raising kids and all that good stuff. Does that work?
That works great.
All right. So Marquita is the first of my 24 heartbeats, mother to an incredibly talented 17-year-old daughter and two intelligent young African American boys that will be tremendous assets to society. So, Marquita, you have three kids
hmm
who
I do.
are amazing.
I
Amazing.
think so. Yeah.
So, I mean, let's just jump right in and give me your thoughts about 2020 and how it is about being a mother in 2020.
Whew. Oh my goodness. Hopefully 2020 calms down a little bit because it has been on whoa since
Yeah,
January 1st, it seems like. So much is happening, so much is going on. You start off the year, let's say even with March, with the kids going into spring break, and then the district notifying everyone that there's a possibility your kids are not coming back to school. Let's prepare you for at-home learning. So a lot of challenges with that, a lot of concerns with that, but ultimately you kind of begin to feel almost safer, because everybody's home. When you
yeah,
go to work, you worry about your kids at school, worry if they're getting sick or if, you have to leave work if they get sick, or you worry about, anything happening to them if, in cases where they may have to walk home from school or just things of that nature. So almost, even though the world outside is dangerous and scary, this shelter stay at home order almost made you believe that you and your family were safe.
right,
But that
right,
is just so not the case.
yeah,
So not the case, unfortunately. So then comes so many other major concerns that are frightening, I would say, to any mother, young or old, probably even, black and non-black. There's just so much going on in the world right now.
yeah, yeah,
So yeah,
agreed. So you get so the kids are on spring break, right? I mean, we are going along as we
yeah,
normally do at the beginning of 2020. We had some crazy stuff that happened, but I mean, for the most part, we're going along as
yeah,
per usual, right? But then
yes,
you get the notification that your kid's not going back to school. So how
exactly.
does that impact you as a mother? Because you work. So how does that impact you? You have three kids
Yeah,
who
exactly.
who aren't going back to school. So what happens in your mind?
So primarily, I'll say that I was fortunate, and I do consider myself fortunate that shortly after this, my employer did decide that we were going to work from home.
Yeah.
So ultimately, I will say that I had previously convinced myself that if I worked from home, life would be so much easier and so much better. That's not the case. I would come to work in like the living room. The kids would either be, on the couch or at the kitchen table trying to do their work. And, I'm verbally, saying, are you guys logged in on time for your Zoom meetings with your teachers? Are you getting your homework assignments
Yeah.
done? Attempting to check and make sure, I appreciate that my school district, Dallas Independent School District, they seem to have been prepared. The students were sent home with their laptops. They were trained on how to log on, showed, beforehand where they could get their lessons and things of that nature. But I think the proof in the pudding was after spring break when everybody had to get acclimated to doing the work or
Yeah.
whatever. So ultimately, the kids were doing it. And you think, oh, this is wonderful. This is great. And then all of a sudden, you get messages from the teachers. We got a couple of missing assignments. I didn't get a face to face. What's going on? So here it is. I am now in the classroom. The classroom has become my home, and it's like I'm still missing things.
Yeah.
So now, there's a challenge of being more active and involved. But like you said, I still work a 9 to 5. So during their at home school hours, I'm still working, from home.
Yeah.
So it presented, I would say, hey, Granny, a slight challenge. I am so glad that it is over, but it did give us a taste of what the fall and future classroom settings may be like. We may be in a position where we're going to permanently be in either a hybrid situation
Yeah.
or, an online learning situation. So definitely some areas to tweak. I have a better idea of what I can do to stay on my boys, especially my daughter. She had it under control. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
see how she aced it, but she had it. And there were cases where even she needed to come away from her classroom assignments to help the younger ones, because even though they're online, they still need help sometimes. They still
Yeah.
need, understanding of instruction. I still have to understand that now I have a teacher who's trying to manage 20 or so students over the internet. So she's probably wondering where are all of, the rest of her students or whatever, and then trying to help, the other ones that are involved. But I would say that I appreciated this experience because I actually got to be active. I had
Yeah.
more of an opportunity to be hands-on, and that was something that I wanted. I hated that it came about the way it came, but I'm going to be more prepared in the fall to just kind of go forth with this full force. I'm going to be mama teacher
Mama teacher.
in the fall. Yeah.
Are you going to make them call you Mrs. Johnson?
No, I don't think I'm going to go that far, but they will have to raise their hands.
I love that. I love that. And I'm glad that you guys, almost seamlessly transitioned into the homeschool learning. And that Tan was there to help.
Yeah.
She's over there like, I'm going to get my associates. I'm good.
Exactly. Exactly.
But she was there to help with her brothers, which is awesome.
Yes.
Then tragedy hits, right? Then
Absolutely.
you guys are going on, y'all are homeschooling. You've come to terms with the fact that your kids are home. They've come to the terms with the fact that this is their new way to do school and the new way to be and whatnot. So, but then tragedy happens. First with Ahmaud Arbery, which happened before spring break even happened, but we didn't really hear about it until the beginning of May. And then at the end of May, it was George Floyd. And I know this hit home to you, for you particularly, because you have 3 kids, but you also have 2 sons. So tell me about your feelings in regards to both Ahmaud and George.
Wow. So many emotions.
Yeah.
I would have to say this is going to be one of the most difficult conversations that we will have later on when remembering 2020 and remembering these 2 incidences. I know it was mentioned to you that I went ahead and proceeded with my so-called threat of shaving Nehemiah, my 13-year-old's face, his mustache, and his little beard. But these 2 incidences were pretty much the deal breaker for me. Shaving his face went well beyond just being, a matter of me feeling comfortable with my baby staying a baby. I did explain that to him as a part of it as well. But it created the opportunity to have another conversation, because I can say that their father and I have had several conversations with them about some of the challenges that they may experience just by being African American young men. Those are things that they cannot change. Those are their natural God-given abilities, rights, and even, God-given gifts or beauty. There is nothing wrong or ugly about them being Black, or nothing wrong or ugly about them being male. That's just who they are. And those are things that they cannot change. My 13-year-old also cannot change the fact that he is coming into his natural right of growing facial hair at such a young age. And he cannot change his ability to slow his growth and his height, even though I would prefer them be a baby as long as they can. But it opened up an opportunity for us to have some conversations about adultification biases amongst our community. It had opened up, that conversation about appearances, which in our country is almost like a whip against us. It's a slash against us, and it's something that unfortunately we don't have a lot of control over. And what I mean by that is history in our country can, in essence, charge, convict, and even in Mr. Floyd's case, cause you to be executed in public on the, in public on camera in the middle of the street for something that ultimately you have rights to. And this is kind of sidebar, if you don't mind, and please forgive my analogies, but I can understand that the police were called because he appeared to be under the influence. And even if they were called because he had a counterfeit $20 bill, in America, in our justice system, if you are caught in a crime, you are supposed to be arrested, read your Miranda rights, have your time before a judge, and if you are convicted or sentenced, get 3 hots and a cot in a prison. You're not supposed to be executed in public, in the middle of the street, and not get that opportunity. So we have in our country this appearance factor. And appearance is pretty much in the eye of the beholder, just like beauty. If in the eyes of that beholder, you appear to be suspicious, you are ultimately assumed guilty. And it's guilty before, not innocent until proved guilty, but just guilty because that's how you appear in the sight of the beholder. So with Mr. Ahmaud Arbery, of course, we only get information that, the news media can provide. If you are able to research records, you might, get a few more details. But under the information that I understand that is available, he appeared to people in his community to be doing something suspicious. And because of that, and because of their state laws, they were allowed to take matters into their own hands. And it ultimately ended to the death of this young man. And we would consider it a wrongful death. And what were the factors that made him to appear suspicious? One is because he was in a neighborhood that is understood to be suburban and not necessarily a predominant place where you will find Black faces like my son's. It was said at one point that he went into a home under construction and that the neighborhood had several break-ins, and the people that saw them thought that maybe he appeared to be or resemble, those that had been causing, the break-ins. But what happens is that it didn't lead to what should have happened. And that could have, I may seem biased on a sense that I feel like it just ended wrong. Even if you simply wanted to have a conversation with him about who he was and why he was there, you don't bring guns to a conversation. If you bring weapons that can end people's lives, it ultimately gives the impression that your intention is not to talk. This young man, actually could have been afraid, but ultimately, in the eyes of the beholder, he was already presumed to be guilty before he even had the opportunity to plead his case. Even with Breonna Taylor, and I know that it's common among our young men, adultification bias is also something that our young women, African American or minority women, struggle with as well. But even in her case, there's the appearance of association. So who she previously was associated with ended up, leading to police coming to her home and there being a gunfight and her losing her life. I don't know how the police do their business nowadays, but TV tells me that at least if you suspect someone, you might call them in, and not charge her house when she wasn't the actual person doing the drugs. That's neither here nor there, and I'm sorry to present that. The police and authority, legal rights, or justice system have that to worry about. But what I'm getting at is there is always this aspect of how we appear. There's like this unwritten appearance law, in essence. Primarily in our country, and I'm sure it's in other countries as well, that says that if you appear to be guilty, you are guilty. And unfortunately, that falls among our African American minority, community, which extends to my sons. If I'm going in too far, just let me know. I don't want to talk too much. But then, so we've talked about Mr. Ahmaud Arbery, we've talked about Breonna Taylor, and we've talked about George Floyd. And those things led to some conversations with my son at 13 about how he appears. It also, and it's unfortunate because I believe, and this is a lesson that I will continue to tell them, I believe that they are leaders. I believe that they are beautiful, they are handsome, no matter what the world says. But in order to protect them, there are some things that we have to, tell them to do. It is unfair that you cannot walk down the street in your neighborhood or someone else's neighborhood and unfortunately not have the chance that you are going to be profiled as a thug, a criminal, or someone that's suspicious.
Yeah.
We had a conversation about them, even when we're in the store. Now, this is something I've been telling them since they were little. Keep your hands out of your pocket. I don't want anyone in any store, no matter what neighborhood I am in, to think that I cannot afford to pay for your purchases and think that you're going to steal. So just to prevent that appearance, let's keep our hands out of our pockets, when we're in the store. And this is something that is so natural for them. If you watch them, they do it all the time. Their father does it, their grandfather does it, or whatever. It's a common gesture amongst men, period, and people, period. But for our young men, especially in such situations, you don't need to have your hands in your pocket because it can appear that you're trying to steal. Does that make sense?
It makes
Whatever. So we're having these conversations about appearances. We also had the conversation about not running to fights. I hate that that's something that we do, that, and it's older people as well. It's not just children. But unfortunately, altercations between groups or even individuals can be exciting for them. And the first thing that they do is they run with the crowds to see what's going on. So we've had to have a conversation about them not doing that, resisting that temptation. Let's not run to fights, run away from them, because this also can prevent a challenge where you're now in the wrong place at the wrong time. You can actually be caught or even arrested by police just for being there and not even being a part of what happened. And unfortunately, in the history of our country, it is possible for you to even be convicted of a crime that you did not commit, even if you had nothing to do with it, but just by being there. And I say that with the example of the exonerated five. They just so happened to be in the facility the night that someone else did a horrible crime against a woman and spent years in prison innocently. So we've had that conversation again, being at the wrong place at the wrong time. It appears that you could have participated in this crime, and because of that, you can absolutely positively be convicted. The very last thing that I want to say about appearances, which really breaks my heart, and it opens up so many other things for me to talk about with my sons, because of 2020. We know here recently that, certain of our senators are attempting to push and get past the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill. And unfortunately, this is coming up for me because it was something that I watched a CNN airing of this incident happening, I believe on the day of Mr. Floyd's, public airing funeral. And the bill itself is being held up. When you think about Emmett Till, and this is something that can be Googled, it is heartbreaking. And I sometimes wonder, it says that his mother told him to take care on how he acted when he went to visit his cousins in Mississippi. So he's from Illinois, which is a city, and of course they're going through segregation or whatever, but Mississippi is in the deep south, so of course it's going to be a little bit different. What I take from this story is that his mother attempted to prepare him for the possibility of how his appearance could lead to trouble with this particular group of people.
Right.
He was a young boy, 14 years of age. So my son will be 14 at the end of the year. And ultimately, what I would say, and from the story, if you read it, just playing around maybe with his friends. But what we would consider innocent, boyish, games ended up leading to not only him losing his life, but being just brutally beat to the point of not being recognizable.
Yeah.
I take from this ultimately is that her attempt was to teach him and prepare him. And even in times of us teaching and preparing, sometimes this doesn't go the way, that we want it to go. Mr. Till could at this point have been someone's, husband, father, or even grandfather had he lived. Now, some may say that that's an extreme, extreme example. But here we are, in our Senate and even for our nation with them trying to get the bill passed to be a federally, nationally, enacted law against anti-lynching, which can be interpreted by many people by different things, and it being held up for mere words or mere, disagreements is disheartening. But
Yeah,
even the fact or the way that it is being held up brought to my, understanding of the way that it was said. And I'll just say this, I know this isn't necessarily a part of what you asked me to come for, but definitely just something that's been on my heart because of 2020. What in the world?
I
We also
know.
know that this is a, a bill, anti-lynching bill has been presented, to the House, over 200 something times. So it's definitely nothing new. But something that has been presented again during our lifetime, whatever. So mothers everywhere, we have definitely a great charge to prepare our sons, especially in the African American community. But with this bill, one of the things that I saw that uh, Rand Paul or Senator Paul was getting to is that the bill would require his example, and I'll go there if that's okay. His
That's
example was that the New Jersey woman who slapped three Jews could potentially, under the bill, also, get 10 years because she used a racial slur. It was a horrible example to me because it's ironic that in our country, an African American person, woman, male, or whomever could even be charged with the act of lynching when it was just them. He only mentioned the one woman doing the slapping. So ultimately, she could fall up under the bill. So, right there to me, is horrible that this bill would even be something that they would use against us.
mm,
But for my son, the example that I thought of is they are boys and they can get in minor altercations even amongst each other and other people all the time. My sons go to school with, Hispanic, Spanish speaking people, Caucasians. Predominantly, our area is African American and Hispanic. If my son or even a Hispanic son, if I can use that as an example, were to get into an altercation, and let's say both of them use racial slurs, and both of them had scratches and scrapes or whatever from their altercation, are you saying that you will use this bill to imprison for the next 10
mm.
years of their life whomever causes the most bruises and uses a racial slur? Even if the bill gets passed, which I believe that it should, and I hope that our legal system would take care to interpret crimes by any individual. We want to see people charged and convicted and pay the price for their injustices, primarily against minorities, because that's where the lynching has been for the past 100 or so years, or since after slavery, primarily. So I just don't see how it can, one, be held up. And the example is the fact that you too, African Americans, you can be charged and spend 10 years of your life in prison and be accused of lynching. And then ultimately to hold it up and continue to give an opportunity for people who are in fact
Mm,
lynching African American and minors every day, and continue to not allow them to see justice is so hurtful. It is a slap in every African American person's face that has served this country in some capacity, whether it's in the military, whether it's even in our public offices, statewide, local in our cities, or even in our national government. To continue to find a way to let people slip through the crack who are ultimately committing horrific injustices against us, and
yeah.
then turn around and say that not only will we find a way to let them get away with it, we're going to continue to find a way to make it appear that you are the guilty person. And
Mm.
unfortunately, Lou, I'm so sorry. That's my burden. I don't think you meant for me to say all of that, and I appreciate you for letting me share. But my goodness, 2020 is a mouthful.
No, baby, that was perfect. That was absolutely perfect. And I appreciate not only your concern as a parent, but also your concern as a citizen to do the homework, to go and research the bill that's being passed and research Emmett Till, because you can hear stuff all day. But if you don't do your own personal work and your own personal research, then you're allowing other people to tell you how to
Yeah.
feel. And so I appreciate that you're doing that. And the reason why I wanted to have this conversation with you is because you and I had a conversation prior to the when I wrote my long post. I was very upset, and we're talking about your son Nehemiah, who is 13, but he looks like a man.
Yeah.
He's a big boy. He's tall. He's has a robust build. He has, you know, a mustache, but he's only 13, right? And
Only. Yes,
so
ma'am.
he's an athlete, and he wanted to go running in the neighborhood.
Yes.
And you were like, nah, no, we're not gonna run in the neighborhood right now,
Yeah.
but you can run in the backyard. And
Yes.
so how was that conversation, and why did you tell him that he could not run out in the neighborhood but to go in the backyard?
So this was shortly after me hearing about Ahmaud Arbery. And so the concern was is that, we have been here in our neighborhood for about 3 years, but I'm smart enough to know that I don't know all of my neighbors and all of my neighbors don't know me. And I would hate for everything that the country is going through to actually affect the minds of those that may be in my neighborhood. I don't want him to go running and others may think, well, this is another Ahmaud. Maybe he's casing the neighborhood. So as a mother, I just wanted to protect him from that what if, and again, the appearance that he could have been doing something wrong when it's completely innocent. The
Yeah,
situation was just too new, and I even feel comfortable and have thought about it. Maybe we can, introduce him to some of the neighbors or just the kids and introduce the entire family, especially those that live a little bit towards the end of the street. In fact, here recently, the football team has started up again with their summer conditioning and training. And so it has led to the boys walking to the park, which is at the end of the street, same area or
yeah,
whatever. You would think that everybody knows there's a park here, watch for kids walking, but you just don't know. And so it led to me just wanting to be safe. I wanted to protect him, I guess
yeah,
is how I explained that or whatever.
yeah,
And I let him know, pretty much my reasons for it. If he is going to run, he will have somebody with him. And that's just the way it has to be for a little bit until things kind of cool off or until I'm comfortable with them knowing us and us knowing them.
yeah. Which I understand. And when I posted that, several people um, reached out to me and were like, well, we can, people who live in different states were like, we can start a running group. And I'm like, how we gonna run and you in
Yeah,
Massachusetts?
yeah,
But I mean, I appreciate their concern. Uh,
exactly. Thank you.
but there shouldn't have to be a running group, is the point.
There shouldn't.
Right.
Right.
But unfortunately in the society that we live in,
Yeah.
and because how much I love each and every one of y'all, I mean, it literally destroyed me to think about any of you, any of my 24 heartbeats
Yeah.
in George Floyd's spot, right? Like I can put you in his spot. I could
Yeah.
put any of your three kids in his spot. And just thinking about that now brings tears to my eyes because I
Oh
don't
yeah.
care what happened in George's past,
Yeah.
because he in the last 6 years he was getting his life together. That
Yeah.
shouldn't be held against him. And
Right.
regardless of the reason why he was at that store, as you mentioned at the very beginning of your talk, is that it still should not have ended that way,
No.
regardless.
No.
And so,
Right.
I took that. I mean, I still take it very personally,
Yeah.
in regards to how all of that went down. And also, when Tiffany, your sister,
Mhm.
um, told me about the fact that you shaved Nehemiah's face,
Yeah.
I understand it. I get it.
Yeah.
He's a 13-year-old baby looking like a 17-year-old, 18-year-old man, right?
Yeah.
And so, when you like, what do you tell BJ? What do you tell his younger brother? He's seeing you do this to his older brother. Like, what are the conversations with the 11-year-old?
So the conversation is primarily the same. BJ may have a slightly younger looking baby face, but ultimately the same thing is going to be a part of his journey as well because he's going to grow up to be a man. I think at this point, it may be easier to associate him with being, a preteen or a teenager than it is for us to do that with Nehemiah. But should he get a mustache anytime between now and 18, his face may be shaved as well.
Yeah. Yeah. But because of the reasons of I need to protect them.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's the biggest thing. The fear that this can so easily happen to someone in my family, whether it be my sons or even the boys, that you spend your Tuesdays with, my nephews, the fear that this can happen to anyone is just that great. I, pray, and it almost seems wrong. The hope that this particular civil injustice and adultification bias or any biases of any kind will just somehow by grace overlook and continue to pass our family, is a prayer that I would have to say that I'm guilty of praying. But at the end of the day, like you said with Mr. Floyd, it just goes to show that it's still all of our fight. That issue did it affected me as far as emotionally, just as it would have if it was someone that I knew. Tears were shed for Mr. Floyd. My prayers went out to his family. And even though we pray that God would just allow, that it doesn't happen to those that close to us, it's almost no different. It's still all of our struggle. It's still all of our fight. And unfortunately, it's a fight that, our children may even have to continue on.
Yeah. And so what are the conversations like with Tanny, your daughter, your 17-year-old?
There are some different conversations with Tanny. Um, and I guess maybe this points out to just how things are a little bit different. So with Tanny, my primary concern with her ultimately, she's quiet and she's an introvert. She's very artsy, and I fear that certain factors in life may begin to cause her to want to separate herself from her African American heritage.
Mm,
Tanny is a little bit lighter. We will say that she's, definitely intelligent, and there are people that may want to classify her as being not the average African American. And I
mhm.
believe that that is just as much as a danger to our community and African American society as it is to be racially profiled or to be, just racism, period. Because ultimately it begins to divide us and it causes us to hate ourselves or hate that particular African American ancestry that we have. It causes us to take on a completely different identity in a sense, to
Mm,
where it makes us want to identify with, non-African American people or people who have completely different types of stereotypes. I feel like Tanny's life maybe a tad bit easier, as you mentioned, as far as academic wise. She'll be one that graduates, with her diploma as well as her associate's degree. And at 18, there is so much more that you can do at life with an associate's degree. We
yeah.
had a conversation with her recently about stereotypes. I unfortunately fulfilled some stereotypes in my life with being, an unwed mother, having a baby outside, wedlock, with being in poverty, being uneducated, living in the ghetto or in the hood, and in some instances on public assistance. And by grace, we overcome those things and gotten better. But I told Tanny she will that does not have to be her testimony at all. And
Yeah.
thankfully, when it's not her testimony, it won't be because she's not the average Black person, just because she's made some better decisions and she's had some open doors available to her, and she did the best with those open doors that she could do. So unfortunately, I hope that it's not um, I don't know. I guess I don't necessarily see anything wrong with it per se, but I think that that's probably my primary concern with her, because I feel like if she has a good education, which is going to lead her to be, get a good job, she might not be those that struggle financially. She's following in that so-called correct American path, if you will, and not necessarily pulling herself up by her bootstraps, but she's just making the best of what America does offer us.
Yeah.
Um, And so I would want her to still be proud of being African American and not look back or look down on those who are struggling in a different way, and ultimately still go forth in protecting herself, knowing that it doesn't mean that she's never going to be racially profiled or see injustices and see those that have, more privilege than she does. But ultimately, I just want her to, love herself, love
Yeah.
herself. And unfortunately, that's kind of been the biggest thing that I've seen with her.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can understand that, and from both of y'all's perspective, I can get that, because she is quiet and she is artistic, and she, is very observant of what is happening, and
Yeah.
so, and I can understand your concern and even your fear in
Yeah.
regards to that, and I just, you are amazing, as I tell you all the time,
You
and
do. I
I
love you for that.
appreciate the hands-on approach that you have with your kids, and I appreciate the education that you're giving them outside of their education, because they will be faced with things that others may not, just because of appearances, as you so eloquently put. And just to have those conversations. And what I want people to understand is that conversations that happen in Black households do not necessarily happen in other households. Now, I am not saying that there are not struggles for different races. I am not saying that people don't have to get to overcome things. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is that when you have to explain to your 13-year-old son why you are shaving his face, that's a conversation that doesn't necessarily happen in other
Right.
households.
Right.
And so it's unfortunate, as you said, and unfair to these babies, because we want to keep them as babies, but the world we live in don't see them as babies. And that's unfair and unfortunate. But we've got to do the best that we can do in order to
Absolutely.
protect them.
Yeah. That's what it's
So
about. Thanks
yeah,
for your protection. We have a village, so hopefully our village, can extend to our community, which is something I would love to see. It's just hard, when you're focused on providing for your family. A lot of times, thinking about other things just really doesn't come in. But I appreciate you. I appreciate Granny and our village on both sides of the kids' family. It definitely helps when we're all in. So that's why I have no doubt that our babies will certainly be great assets to our society and our communities.
yep. Well, listen, Kita, I could talk to you forever. I
I know, right?
mean,
Call
and
me.
I know, but seriously, I mean, you've provided some great insight on a lot of things. And as you said, if you guys want to go out and Google some of the information that she mentioned, the Emmett Till
Please.
bill, Emmett Till
Yeah.
himself, what happened to him, and just, educate yourself and don't rely on one source
Right.
of information, because there are always other sides of the story, but you have to be willing and open to educate yourself and to see what's happening in the world. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. I love you so much.
I
Mwah.
love you too. This has been another episode of Make Kind Loud,
Woo-hoo.
conversations that turn up the volume. Today we talked to Marquita Johnson, who is the
Yeah.
mother of 3 beautiful kids, and she is doing her best to protect them and to make sure that they understand that they are going to be beautiful assets to this world if they just make the right decisions and if they protect themselves as they get older. And so again, Marquita, I appreciate you. Thank you again for being here. And we will see you guys next week on another
Woo.
episode of
Make
Make
that
Kind
loud.
Loud, conversations that
Woo-hoo.
turn up the volume.
Bye. I love you.